So, what now?
The ending of Final Fantasy VII Remake is surprising, to say the least. Potentially, we might see the upcoming installments going in a radically different direction compared to the original, which understandably is going to cause a bit of unrest in the hardcore fanbase. Remake's ending is based on the freeway escape from Midgar in the original. Both Remake and Original have the player fighting off Shinra troops on a motorcycle, all while protecting the rest of the party in a pickup truck, culminating in a boss fight against a big old robot tank dude. However, in the original, the party reaches the literal end of the road, with Cloud pledging to find Sephiroth and save the planet, whereas the Remake has the characters reaching the end of the road and facing a divergence in destiny. Throughout the remake, the characters are often dealing with whispers, hooded beings not present in the original game who are trying to preserve the flow of destiny, or to put it simply, the events of the original game. So, anytime the characters try to diverge from the original path or try to change something, the whispers intervene. The biggest piece of evidence to this is the unexpected death of Barret at the hands of Sephiroth, which is almost immediately rectified by the Whispers, bringing him back to life. What's also interesting is only our main characters and Rufus Shinra are able to see the Whispers. This is likely because these are people who have had or will have some sort of influence over destiny. There's a lot that can be read into the Whispers. Personally, I can't help but think of them as a metaphor for the Final Fantasy fanbase, wanting the remake to be exactly how they remember the original game, making sure all the events play out as they should, and being resistant to any sort of change. I'm not saying that's how everyone in the Final Fantasy fanbase is, I'm just saying there's a fair bit of meta that can be read into these spooky boys.
Should this world be unmade, so too shall her children.
When the freeway chase ends, the crew exchanges a few words with a zealotous Sephiroth. Suddenly, the whispers start turning into screams, and out of nowhere, we are taken to an unexpected but familiar scene: the final stand of Zack Fair.
The price of freedom is steep.
And as I'm sure you all noticed, the Whispers are present here too. We'll be talking about this more in just a bit. After this, Sephiroth goads you to follow him into some dark portal. Before you do, Aerith warns Cloud that this is the point of no return, does some sparkly magic stuff, and then explains to the party that this is a crossroads in destiny. If the party crosses over, they will be in a place of freedom.
Boundless, terrifying freedom. Like a great, never-ending sky.
Which I read as a place where fate is not set in stone, where, unlike this world, destiny has not been written. An important thing to note is that throughout the game you get the sense that both Aerith and Sephiroth are in some ways aware of future events. The game even does a couple flash forwards, specifically Aerith's death and Red 15's 500 years later epilogue scene.
What the hell did I just see?
A glimpse of tomorrow if we fail here today.
It could be theorized that Sephiroth himself is trying to disrupt the flow of destiny so that his plan ultimately succeeds. Or you could easily look at it in the opposite way. Maybe Sephiroth's plan did succeed in the original, and now he's trying to make sure it happens again.
There's no greater threat to the planet than him. Sephiroth has to be stopped.
It's also interesting that in the remake, it's Aerith that tells the group that Sephiroth must be stopped. But in the original, it's Cloud who drops this objective on the group, with Aerith simply saying that she'll join because there are things she needs to find out. Upon entering the portal, the characters begin to battle the embodiment of destiny, eventually defeating it. It's a pretty dope boss fight too. You get to fight a new version of Bahamut at one point. It's great. Some other fun stuff happens with Sephiroth too, but we'll touch on that in just a second. So, what does all of this mean? Well, basically, we are playing a version of Final Fantasy VII that exists in an alternate timeline. Final Fantasy, for lack of a better term, just pulled Star Trek. Did JJ consult on this? You can practically hear the fanbase splitting before the credits roll. Some will think this is cool, a fresh take on a story we all know so very well. And some will absolutely hate this, seeing it as a total betrayal. Just another example of Square mucking things up for no good reason. So, what did I think of all of this? Well, as I said in my review, which is linked at the top, I am rather indifferent. I don't know if this is good or bad because I need to see how this all plays out. I don't know what the developers' plans are, so it doesn't make sense for me to jump to any conclusions. All I can do is speculate. But it's not hard to see how this could turn out horribly. One thing Final Fantasy VII Remake accomplishes is not only accurately updating and expanding just about every little thing found in the Midgar section of the original, but also preserving everything that made the characters so great and adds appropriate depth to them. The game made us fall in love with them all over. So if the next game in this remake turns out to be a glorified what-if scenario, built on just seeing how events could have played out differently, like what if Aerith didn't die, for example, it's really doing a massive disservice to these characters and to what the story of Final Fantasy VII is.
Wouldn't be the first time I spit in Destiny's eye.
I don't think this will happen though. Call me optimistic, but I think the rest of the remake will largely play out the same as the original. I think this new story element is there to justify a few tweaks and changes to the original story, and if anything, it means expanding it, adding more plot and more missions to what will hopefully be a more open game.
Wait. Was that all of them?
However, what will surely affect the story of 7 Remake is the megaton twist that Zack Fair has been spared in this timeline. In the original game and the prequel, Crisis Core, Zack escaped Hojo's Sephiroth clone experiment with a comatose Cloud on his back, only to be tracked down by Shinra soldiers and murdered. This caused Cloud to unknowingly assume part of Zack's identity, which eventually leads to his character-defining identity crisis. So how the hell is Zack alive? Well, there may be a slim explanation. In the remake, after you defeat Destiny, you and your party fight and defeat Sephiroth, who whisks Cloud away to the edge of creation and tells him, cryptically, that he has 7 seconds to do something.
7 seconds till the end. Time enough for you, perhaps. But what will you do with it? Let's see.
Cloud presumably uses this to save Zack's life. Well, I guess we don't really know for sure, but that is the presumption. I did see one theory floating around online saying that 7 seconds was all the time it took for Sephiroth to kill Aerith. I timed this out for myself and maybe. This is all assuming that the timer starts right when Sephiroth comes on screen and right when that sword goes through Aerith. I don't know, it's a little flimsy. But it does make me think that maybe Sephiroth is alluding to a future decision Cloud will have to make, like choosing whether or not to save Aerith. And I'm gonna guess Cloud is only gonna have 7 seconds. Or rather, the player will. And seeing as how part 1 of this remake had several instances of player choice, granted minor ones, but choices nonetheless, perhaps that's the key to possible changes in the upcoming games. A lot more player choice. I'm going to go into this a little more in next week's video, but for now, let's get back to Zack.
Almost there, Cloud. We're almost there.
While we may not have the clearest explanation, Zack has been saved in FF7 Remake. Now, who's to say if this affected Cloud's current timeline in the first place or changed some alternate, totally separate one? There's a little bit of credence to this since we see a quick flash of Stamp the dog in Zack's cutscene, which happens to be a different breed from the Stamp we saw earlier in the game. Nothing like a good old-fashioned multiverse to complicate things. Either way, this revelation could have serious implications on Cloud's character development, which is going to be one of the key things that will worry longtime fans. Now, if we entertain the idea that Zack and Cloud are in the same timeline, that doesn't mean a horrible fate didn't befall Zack. I mean, Cloud still ended up in the same place regardless of Zack's death. No crazy time paradoxes happened. At least as far as we know. If this is the case, my first thought is, well, maybe Zack was recaptured and possibly killed or further experimented on. In fact, before the Rufus fight in the Shinra building, the game puts an extra amount of focus on a Sephiroth clone that got away with Jenova's body, number 2. I wondered if this could have possibly been Zack, now a mindless zombie for Sephiroth. Yeah, our first problem with this though is that there's a notable lack of scar on the clone's face, on top of the fact that Hojo only tattooed numbers on the Sephiroth clones that were successful and fully accepted Jenova cells, discarding any test subjects that didn't. Zack resisted the cells and thus was a failed subject, but that doesn't change the fact that Zack, like Cloud, still has Jenova cells in his body and is still susceptible to the manipulation of reunion. In fact, I'm going to make a Hail Mary theory and propose that when Sephiroth does kill Aerith, and I'm pretty sure he still will, he's going to do it acting through Zack's body. Just imagine the drama that will come from that. But once again, that's all assuming that he's still alive and in the same universe as our current Cloud. Oh man, this is already too confusing. I do think there's something up with Sephiroth clone number 2 though. I mean, why put any focus on him in the first place? I don't know, maybe you guys will have a better idea than me. Let me know in the comments. Now, a big thing a lot of you are probably wondering is how this alternate timeline even happened in the first place. Well, I think the answer to that question might lie in the ending of the original game. So, just to recap, Meteor comes to Earth, Holy tries to stop it, and fails. Then the live stream emerges from the planet, attacks Meteor, and then a blinding flash of light. Okay, see this shot? This is the very last shot before the credits roll, and it's pretty interesting. So for years and years, pretty much everyone has assumed this was Aerith's spirit watching over everyone, likely being her who summoned the powers of the planet to stop Meteor. That's what everyone assumed, and that's probably what the developers intended 23 years ago. But here's my thought. What if that last shot is this shot? That moment is this moment. You following me here? What if the ending of the original is the beginning of the remake? What if when Aerith was crouched in that alley, she received a vision, a warning of what's to come? She saw her meeting with Cloud, she saw her death, she saw her friends fight Sephiroth, and she ultimately saw Meteor fall. What if that vision Aerith had was the original Final Fantasy VII, and now in the remake, she, whether she is fully aware or not, is trying to stop these events? Let's look at how the original starts. We have the close-up of Aerith, eyes open by the way. Aerith gets up, she walks out to the sidewalk, and then we pan out for the title. Okay, but then we go to the remake. We have the close-up of Aerith opening her eyes. She looks up, suddenly senses danger from the alley, likely our hooded Whisper friends already intervening on a possible divergence. She walks out, bumps into a guy, and drops her flowers. All the while, the music takes on this slightly sinister tone with a few notes of One Winged Angel playing in the background. Already within the first few minutes of the game, we have clues that there has been a timeline divergence. A lot of us wrote this off as just a small creative change for the remake, but now that we know the ending, we have to take moments like these as hard clues. One thing is for sure, Square is doing some interesting stuff with this remake, and just like everyone else, I am on the edge of my seat waiting to see what happens next. But what do you guys think? What are your thoughts on this controversial ending? Anybody have their own theories? Is there anything in this video I missed? Be sure to let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button and hit the like button. I post new videos weekly, Thursdays at 2, and sometimes bonus videos like this on Fridays. Until next time, I'm Kirk, and thank you for watching this video. Stay safe out there.